You did. You sat right next to me. You said, so
Good afternoon, everybody. I call to order the April 26th meeting of the Finance and Operations Committee of the Board of Regents. Thank you to those of you who are joining us in the room, those of us on live stream, and those who are joining us by Zoom. I want to especially welcome our student representatives, Aaron Maher from Morris and Caleb Massey from the Twin Cities campus. Really good to have you with us. Let's go ahead and just dive in. Our first item today is to hear about the annual Workforce and Human Resource Strategy Report. Here to provide the report is Vice President for Human Resources, Ken Horstman. And President Cunningham, would you like to start us off? If you can get, let me do that again. President Cunningham, would you like to start the discussion?
Thank you very much, Chair Wheeler. Getting my head back in from lunch. This is a really important topic. As you know, investing in our workforce is both a board priority for this year and an imperative in our strategic roadmap, Elevate Extraordinary 2030. And this is for a very good reason. We are Minnesota's 5th largest employer with staff and faculty across the state at our 5 campuses, at our research outreach centers, and in all 87 counties where we have extension representation. We are very fortunate for Vice President Horstman leading this effort. Vice President Horstman, I especially appreciate the way you've centered participation and collaboration as you've been leading this effort forward, and you have my full support in this process, and I look forward to your report and the discussion with the committee. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam President. Chair Wheeler and members of the committee, I am pleased to provide an update on HR's role in fulfilling the university's 3-part mission, providing a world-class education, groundbreaking research, and community-engaged outreach as we serve Minnesota. Our goal today is to demonstrate how human resources as a function at the university is evolving to attract, engage, and develop world-class talent to support and advance the university's mission. We really have 6 priorities that guide our efforts to lead and innovate HR strategy in higher education. Our priorities are to build one HR community to promote consistency across a decentralized system with regard to employment and HR practices, not necessarily as an organizational structure, but a consistency that allows employees to understand what they can expect going from unit to unit. We also want to advance data and technology to empower decision-making, develop leading HR services, support work environment and culture, develop leaders across the organization, and continue to further improve support for employees. For our One HR approach to work well, we need to innovate and partner effectively through an integrated approach to HR across the system. This goal is to build a seamless approach will be central to our upcoming strategic planning effort in human resources, since it is informed by the needs of our HR community, as well as leaders and staff in our central office. The areas where local campus, college, and unit HR professionals collaborate with central HR staff help elevate the quality of the services across the university. We do this by engaging the HR leaders on campuses, in colleges, and administrative units, including a new onboarding experience individually for each new HR lead, and a year-long leadership development program to support their success. These areas of collaboration help us to meet the unique needs of each campus, college, and unit while maintaining core policies and practices to ensure equitable treatment and set a consistent employment foundation for faculty and staff. The Office of Human Resources provides key systems and expertise to support the HR community, leaders, faculty, staff, retirees, and job seekers. Next, I'm going to highlight key areas where we have made improvements. Advancing our data and technology practice has focused on artificial intelligence recently. We have developed a framework for HR practitioners across the university to experiment and use AI, particularly generative AI, which is used in chatbots or tools that can write or create images in ways that are compliant, legal, and ethical. The framework includes guiding principles that call out equity and fairness, as well as human accountability, and we have identified risk factors via HR use cases to provide more specific examples to the HR community. Other technology improvements have continued over the past year, including automating the pay change notification required under state law that we provide each year to over 27,000 employees. Data is a cornerstone of our job family studies, and we have used market data to inform refinements now of 96% of our job families by the end of this fiscal year. As one of the larger employers in the state, we actively attract job seekers and candidates with over 850,000 visits to the recruiting site during the 24-25 fiscal year. OHR is creating strategic, employee-centered, and technology-supported practices that focus on developing the HR community leaders and people-first strategies. We are proud of the examples we can offer to illustrate this practice. As an employer, we are required to meet the state's paid leave requirement, which started in January of '26. Our strategy focused on creating a supportive employee experience through the use of a private vendor option, which is compliant with state law. Additionally, this required updating existing leave policies to align with the state requirement. Another example to support students looking for work at the university is a simplified student job application form that also supports local units seeking part-time help. The university truly supports student part-time employment with over 9,000 students employed on a semester basis. And the average wage in the fall of 2025 for our students was $15.94 an hour, which at that time ranked 6th in the Big Ten, only behind Washington and the California schools. Some key metrics we would like to share related to innovative and leading HR services include that 100% of our HR leads have been onboarded this year, and as I said before, are engaged in a year-long development program that is very interactive. The PEAK initiative launched in its phase 3 units on March 23rd. There are 4 phases in total. We expect to complete this for both HR and finance by the end of December. One of the HR services changed as part of PEAK is the hiring process and staffing operations, which has received positive feedback. For example, at the Duluth campus, hiring managers have reported a 90% satisfaction rate with the PEAK hiring service. Since implementation of phase 2 and phase 3, we have heard similar comments supportive of changes to talent acquisition and staffing operations. Next, the university needed to develop job competencies to help define knowledge, skills, and abilities needed to succeed in a role. And we do this for each specific job code as we move along. After starting this development effort 2 years ago, a total of 650 competencies relevant to individual jobs were developed by the end of last year as a foundation to support employee development and also hiring practices. Helping to create an environment that supports employees and has a positive impact on them is a priority for us. One of the most difficult challenges leaders and supervisors face is a difficult situation that impacts the emotional health and well-being of their team. And in a place this size and this diverse, we have those come up from time to time, as we well know. OHR is ready to help connect faculty and staff in our community directly with our employee assistance program vendor, Lyra Health. This EAP offers a range of support options for our workforce. After a recent incident, a leader shared this quote: "Our team closely partnered with Lyra Health to help staff members process a challenging situation. We're grateful to have Lyra as a valuable resource." While these situations are thankfully uncommon, they can be very challenging for the employees affected. We are pleased that the services we provide are available within 24 hours and can be extended for up to a year for an impacted employee. Other ways HR supports a positive and resilient work culture include the following examples. This past year, over 700 employees have engaged in what we call the cultural competency journey. It includes an intercultural development inventory assessment that supports employees in working toward mitigating unintended barriers and providing leaders with the awareness and tools to identify possible barriers as they build their campus, college, and office strategies. On a separate note, as a higher education institution, we attract employees who may be seeking a degree while they work. In 2025, we answered questions from over 2,500 employees inquiring about the Regents' tuition benefit. And our employee and labor relations team trained 266 HR staff in the last year to ensure they can navigate an increasingly complex work environment that includes labor represented, civil service, professional and administrative staff, and faculty in a respectful manner. As we shared during the past year, one of our investments in retaining and supporting employees is the launch of a new employee development center. I'm going to give a little more detail on this in a minute, but I wanted to share initially the highlights from our work with the IT job family, which started this idea in July of 2025. Chelsea, an IT professional, shared that participating in a gig through this platform allowed her to collaborate with people outside the department, gaining valuable insight into managing large-scale initiatives, and the experience made her a stronger project manager. Since its launch, 50% of IT employees with access to it have logged in, and nearly 70% are repeat visitors to the platform. Additionally, 53 IT gigs or micro projects have been posted, with many of them currently underway or already completed. Developing leaders across the university is necessary to ensure the institution continues to navigate change and attract top talent. HR plays a role in developing both academic and executive leaders through our core leadership competencies. This competency model helps leaders recognize the key behaviors and capabilities essential for their own leadership success and for driving effectiveness within their unit. One of the many ways to gauge and develop these critical behaviors is through a 360-degree assessment, which provides valuable insights from multiple perspectives. Our office works in close partnership with the Office of Faculty and Academic Affairs and the Provost's Office, individual deans and their leadership teams, to create opportunities that encourage interested faculty to consider leadership roles. Our office has developed a talent framework specifically for academic leaders and consults with colleges and departments, including on how to interpret and take action on their faculty results from the employee engagement survey. A leadership talent framework supports the executive leader employee life cycle. In addition, a range of training opportunities is offered to supervisors and managers at the university. Recently, one participant of the module manager's coach session shared, "This course gave me the framework to have more guided, focused coaching conversations with my employees. Coaching was a key factor that employees identified as lacking in our recent engagement survey." The engagement of our community and the development opportunities I have mentioned can be seen in some of the following examples of people involved. 70 heads, chairs, center directors, associate deans, and vice chancellors completed the academic leadership program through 2025. 86% of our colleges and units have consulted with our office on faculty leadership development, and 540 supervisors have completed an OHR supervisory development program in this current fiscal year. Direct support of our employees takes many forms. The university offers a competitive benefits program that offers employees several options for their own care. And as you are aware, our trend on health care is climbing like it is for many employers. Pharmacy costs overall remain a key driver of the increasing costs of medical benefits. And balancing the benefits of new drug treatments and costs is challenging and complex. So the university uses internal pharmacy expertise from our College of Pharmacy to understand the landscape, the trends, the cost drivers, and options available to the plan. This deep expertise helps us better prepare for the impacts of a range of drugs, helping us identify risks and opportunities on our formulary and in how we manage our benefits to provide better, cost-efficient options while maintaining choice. Other examples of how we enhance direct support to employees include responding to calls and emails to our contact center on a variety of topics. This center is staffed with 10 or less employees typically, and each year, as in 2025, we handle over 57,000 calls. Mental health support is valued by employees of those who use our employee assistance program. In the first 3 quarters of 2025, 83% responded confidentially to a survey that they felt they had improved mental health due to the program. Finally, our total rewards program, which includes medical and dental and retirement primarily, provides a positive incremental value to our employees in regard to their total compensation. We estimate the value to our civil service employees, as an example, is approximately a 2.5% incremental addition to total compensation. And for P&A staff, in the past year, it's an incremental 3.6% bump over their base salary. And that is compared to markets of large local employers. We're excited to share 3 key efforts in more depth that are advancing our effectiveness across the university. As I mentioned earlier, the Employee Development Center was created as a joint project between IT and HR to meet the needs of employees to keep their skills fresh as technology changes rapidly while providing real-world experience. For our office, the EDC will help us address feedback from the university's employee engagement survey asking for more development opportunities. Growth and adoption of this program continues with, hopefully in the future, with additional job families. Currently, with access granted to nearly 350 HR employees, as of late February, we know that at least 570 people between IT and HR have completed at least one activity on the site. These numbers have grown since we submitted the docket, and we expect them to continue to grow. Examples of activities that would be completed are an online talent profile, which is a necessary step before applying to join a gig, or taking a skills inventory to help the employee understand their strengths and interests and identify possible areas they'd like to build on. Each gig offers employees the opportunity to try a new skill or build their expertise while assisting a unit with a special project or covering a temporary leave. The vast numbers of gigs are virtual, meaning an employee in Crookston, for instance, can assist a unit in Rochester or vice versa. With 72% of the gigs available online, the ease of cross-campus collaboration is entering a new era. Employees are also building their networks through mentorship matching modules, which has facilitated more than a dozen mentor-mentee relationships at this early date. We're excited about the incredible potential of the EDC, the benefits to our workforce, and expanded options for professional development and internal mobility across the university. Through Elevate Extraordinary 2030, we are leading an action team focused on investments in the university's workforce. Our work is evolving toward a fully integrated system-wide approach to workforce strategy. Inspired by the original Workforce Reinvestment Resolution, brought forward by the University Senate, we are working to create a visible and transparent process for how the university gathers employee input, considers financial realities as it prioritizes, rebalances, and implements short and long-term workforce investment. We are pleased to report that the university has made significant investments in our workforce through the Workforce Reinvestment Resolution to date. And our charge is to continue to address the remaining recommendations through the new strategic planning process. The first investments in response to the workforce resolution were in 2024, with an increase to the P&A and civil service wage floors, implementation of the new FLSA exempt floors at that time, the student wage increase, and the postdoc salary floor increase. The 2024 changes represented a $2 million recurring investment. Additionally, in FY25 and FY26, we initiated the idea of a market adjustment component to pay, and at that time, for those 2 years, we implemented it on a system-wide basis, representing a significant investment of close to $30 million over 2 years. We also expect institutionalized leadership development, performance management, and hiring practices with measurable improvements in engagement and workforce agility as part of this effort. All of this work positions the university well for sustained competitiveness and a mission-driven workforce excellence. When the university launched its employee engagement survey in 2013, we were among the first in the nation to do so, and we are among the few that survey both faculty and staff. In the fall of 2025, the university completed its 8th cycle of the employee engagement survey, including a 70% response rate overall. Over 12,000 staff, or 75%, and 2,700 faculty, or 56%, completed the survey. Sent to all benefits eligible faculty and staff, the survey is the university's central mechanism for gathering actionable insights that help leaders understand how employees are experiencing their environment, monitor progress on past actions, and identify opportunities. Since we launched in 2013, more than 108,000 employees have completed this survey. The biannual event is deeply integrated as a component of university operations, one that drives an effective work environment, strengthens engagement, and supports retention. A few highlights from our latest survey show that a solid 75% of staff and 70% of faculty identify themselves as committed and dedicated, meaning they are motivated, care about their work, and are invested in the collective work of their group, unit, and university. Faculty also share positive viewpoints of their department's commitment to high-quality scholarship and student support, with those two items receiving favorable rates of 85% and 81%, respectively. Faculty also shared that they are treated with respect and have enough authority to carry out their jobs. There was an 8-point rebound from the 2021 survey that shows 49% of faculty currently identify themselves as engaged. Aside from the dip during the pandemic, the faculty engagement has remained steady over the years of the survey. When employees are engaged, they are more productive, innovative, resilient, and committed. These attributes can also be found among staff whose engagement is in their work at an all-time high of 60%. That's an increase of 10% since the first survey. With the survey complete, OHR is now working with college leaders and supervisors to help them interpret the results and develop action plans to address areas of opportunity before the next survey comes in 18 months. We have touched on many of our achievements in fiscal year 26, which have helped us take important steps to our goals for FY27. Elevate Extraordinary 2030 action items will be a key focus, along with the development of an HR system-wide strategic plan. Additionally, we plan to roll out the EDC beyond IT and HR. Finally, we are expanding the use of AI within OHR, including the possible launching of a chatbot in the fall to help employees and job seekers find what they need faster than ever before. The challenges we see ahead of us over the next year include managing our HR management systems. Our current HRMS system continues to meet our immediate needs and has served us very well historically. It is aging, and as it ages, these systems typically are more difficult to sustain as time goes on. The process to assess upgrades or a change to this system is a multi-year process in partnership with OIT, who will help lead us through this effort. We need to study the marketplace, look at current options, and determine what such a project would involve. So when the time comes, and it's probably years away, but when that time comes, this type of preparation respects the significant investment that will eventually need to be made and equips us to make the right decision. It is prudent that we begin to evaluate system options now so we can ensure reliable continuity to our systems, and this includes payroll, HR files, and absence tracking. An HR mentor once told me that with an accurate payroll, every day is a happy day. Sometimes people just don't know it. He also said, if you don't believe me, just wait till that doesn't happen once. Other challenges include reinforcing legal and ethical use of artificial intelligence related to human resources, balancing compensation and benefits to support employees in the rapidly changing state and federal landscape. The decentralized nature of the University of Minnesota provides tremendous value in many ways, and it does also continue to be a challenge given the complexity of the university. But our emphasis on building one HR sets the foundation for a more cohesive and coordinated community based on the actual work that needs to be done. This concludes my presentation, and I welcome your questions. And with me in the audience today is everyone who actually knows about this stuff. So depending on your question, I may be phoning a friend, but they're well equipped. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much, Vice President Horstman. Are there any questions? Yes, please. Regent Mohammed.
Thank you. I know many folks utilize the engagement survey as a model. I've seen it utilized in some of my workplaces, and so kudos to that. I think one particular question I do have is around really the enablement of AI as it relates to human capital, and really how are we seeing, elements of our legacy ERP system potentially maybe being impacted by some of the more modern technological improvements that you're recommending, right? And particularly, how are you seeing the lens of mitigating potential bias, right?
Yeah.
Which naturally just comes with AI as we know it, and there is some litigation, I think, happening in other ecosystems. But yeah, just thinking about how do we honor our legacy ERP system, and also how do we enable AI in a way that really thinks about it from a more ethical standpoint, if you have any practical examples.
Chair Wheeler, Regent Mohammed, that's an excellent question, and it's one we ponder a great deal. First, I did talk about principles around AI, and we have a number of them that we're trying to follow for guidance. However, one aspect of this, I would say, that we start with is no harm, no foul. Whatever we do now has to be a step that significantly supports our faculty, staff, and students. We have PeopleSoft 9.2, which has some limitations compared to current systems around how AI is currently incorporated, but that doesn't mean we can't make logical and useful progress, and the chatbot I mentioned is probably a first step in that. Another aspect of that is AI has allowed us to make our leadership and supervisory training more scalable, because we can have simulations on demand in modules that a supervisor can pull up on their own schedule and go through the training without having to go somewhere or be in a room. So those are two examples that won't impact other jobs, but will actually enhance the way we provide service. The training one is already in place. The chatbot is to come. But we look to guidance from our AI hub as we go forward in the future to make sure we are compliant. We also are connected to the Big 10 peers. The HR community actually has a standing committee now on AI where we share examples. And there are peers that, just due to their current situation, have already ventured into some of the things I'm talking about, and we can learn from their experience. Happy to provide more information, and 6 months from now or 3 months, I might have a completely different answer given the trajectory of that topic.
Thank you. Regent Goldberg-Luger.
Ask a similar question, so thank you.
Okay, thank you. Vice President Cunningham.
Yeah, I just want to say thank you. It's a tremendous amount of work that you and the team are doing all across all of our job classes. And I'm particularly excited about the workforce reinvestment focus that we have, and how we've been focused on addressing the salary issues across our job classes. And you've done that in a really elegant way, focused in the past couple of years, and we'll do more of that going forward. Along with the reinforcement that we've had this past year with merit, and ensuring that, again, that we have good compensation for our faculty has been a real priority. And I know that your team has been great advocates for that, and we're happy to have you as partners, so thank you.
Great. Appreciate that, President Cunningham. And I'll just ask a follow-up question to that. So, one of the things we are, as President Cunningham said, the Board of Regents is really behind the workforce reinvestment. We know that people are the reason we excel, at what we do. And I like the holistic way you're looking at how do you support, talent acquisition to development to, mental health resources, all of those things. So you've done a lot of things in this reinvestment side. What should we as Board of Regents, are there particular things or that you've articulated in the strategic plan that tell us that we're making the progress we need to make? What should we be cognizant of?
Thank you, Chair Wheeler. Again, that's an excellent question. I mean, I think for a number of years now, we've been setting the groundwork. A number of years ago, and this involves people who came before us, we didn't know what we didn't know. We didn't have a structure to our staff job families, especially the P&A family. It was sort of wide open. And the work we have done, although painful at times and a slog, to get us to a point where we could actually refine it to the marketplace was a significant step. I think the learning from that is once you get that information, you find out where your problems are, and you may have some surprises where you thought there was an issue and there is not one. And it doesn't immediately give you the financial resources to fix everything. So that's where priority setting comes in and making some astute strategic decisions on how we manage our faculty and staff to our strategic plan and make the right decisions with the resources we have. We have been able now to refine, I think, all the faculty job categories at Duluth, at Crookston, at Rochester, and recently we have completed Morris. And after we finish the general administrative job family, the Twin Cities campus for faculty is next, and we are engaged, the provost and I are talking about what does that look like? Because that will be a big task. But I think we need to get there so we have good information. And then, of course, the progress you make, if you look over the last few years with the market adjustments, we are making slow but incremental progress, and it's not an overnight fix. I think, though, having the right information so we know where we are to the marketplace is really important, and that gives us a baseline to make improvements.
So I think I hear you saying, Vice President, let's make sure we have the requisite information. That is just what we need to improve. Then we can make the necessary adjustments that allow for thoughtful reinvestment in the workforce going forward. And then, of course, the employee engagement piece is another piece that we can look at in that regard.
Next time, I'm going to have you answer this question.
No, I'm just reiterating what I've heard from you, Regent Bergstrom.
Thank you for the report. Well, thank you, Chair Wheeler. Similar question, but what should we be knowing about the sort of the 13-year history now of the survey, or 14-year history? Are there trend lines there that we should be aware of, good or bad, that should be on our radar in terms of also asking smarter questions in the future?
Well, to adequately answer that, I'm going to ask our expert Senior Director Sullivan, Brandon Sullivan, to join me. He is the author of this survey, and as the creator and the one who's managed it over this time, I don't want to set you up for having to provide a really evolved answer, but go ahead, Brandon.
Yeah, Chair Wheeler, Regent Bergstrom. There's a lot we could unpack on that as a large, complex, decentralized organization. But what I would say, to give you a kind of a quick answer, is that what we've seen over the last decade or so is that for staff, we've seen a really large increase in the effectiveness of the work environment as they're experiencing the university. That's really a marked improvement. I've done this kind of work in other organizations. You don't tend to see the type of large increases that you have seen over a decade without real work going into it. Employees, have a high bar for when they say the work environment is effective. That doesn't mean there aren't challenges, there aren't places where that hasn't happened or where it's gotten, maybe gone in the other direction. But overall, we've seen it was a 10-point increase in ratings of the effective environment for staff. What we see for faculty is more complex, and that's where I think there might be value in some additional conversation. For faculty, it's harder, I think, to make system-wide changes, to do training for supervisors, to do these kinds of things that might impact the day-to-day work of all faculty at the same time. Each college, each academic unit has their own challenges, their own complexities, their own ways of operating. You think about, our clinical faculty versus, faculty in a liberal arts department versus, faculty in a, vet med role or so on. There's goes on and on. Very different contexts, very different challenges and situations. So what we've seen there overall is kind of flat. It's where you kind of unpack that, and what we do see very clearly is where faculty feedback is translated into action, we do see improvement there. It's just that tends to be more of a local sort of college by college or unit by unit phenomenon. So that's where the leadership development work that Vice President Horstman was talking about that we're doing around academic leadership in particular, I think is a really important part of how we can address engagement for faculty, is by helping equip those academic leaders with some of the skills and some of the insights that they need to really address the complexity of faculty engagement. So there's a lot more we could kind of talk about, but I hope that gives you maybe a high-level view. I will one maybe last thing that I will add. We do have, as we work with a vendor that's a global firm. They have data from thousands of organizations around the world. And one of the things that allows us to do is to benchmark. Now, we can't benchmark against our peers because we're one of our only peers to do this work at this level, but we can look at, for example, they have a benchmark of high-performing organizations that you could kind of think of as the top of the Fortune 500, and our level of commitment and dedication for faculty and staff is at that level. So we, from the level of sort of the commitment people have, both faculty and staff, to the mission, to their work, why they're here, it is among the top. It's really that effective environment piece where we've seen a lot of challenge, which is, partly a reflection of the industry that we're in and the unique challenges in higher ed, which I think really speaks to how kind of what a big deal it is to see an improvement on the staff side on that. And so I think that's where kind of on the faculty side, there's that opportunity there. So yeah, let me wrap it up there, but is that helpful? I hope.
President Cunningham.
Oh, I just wanted to add a comment. It's on a different topic, and thank you. That was very illustrative. You have the program, I think you call it the gig worker program or something. I might not be getting that quite right. But I just want to point out how innovative that is. I mean, we have a large group of employees. You can say it better than I, but it really allows employees to try to do something else for a while. It allows us to not have to go to outside people and buy outside people's time. It's very efficient for us. Instead, we're using the resources of the many different people that we have. Can you just highlight that program again for 1 minute? Because I think it's an efficient use of our resources. It allows us actually not to use consultants and other things outside because we have so much talent inside the organization, and gives our employees an opportunity to do something different. It's really innovative.
Yeah, I think it started with the term talent mobility marketplace, and we shifted to Employee Development Center, or EDC. The original idea came out of conversations initiated by the Office of IT, and their HR lead there, Kendrick Moore, worked with Brandon and team and a number of people in our office to partner on how we develop this. And our HRMS team was involved. We had to procure a platform. And IT went first because their work generally, I think, besides they were early adopters and had that view, their work tends to gravitate towards being able to work virtually and system-wide. And they had also been, over the last 20 years, peakified, if I can call it that, to where they had streamlined a lot of their services. So their next step when we launched Peak was, how do we make the best use of the resources we have? And how do we allow people to grow in an IT profession without having to leave their current job? And this has really allowed for that. I talked about the number of gigs that have been done, but when you think about people on different campuses that don't even have to leave their location to work together, and the networks they build, the relationships they build, the varied experiences they build. I mean, most of my career, the valuable parts, I may have not thought of it at the moment, but we're moving horizontally to learn a broader set of skills. So when an opportunity came up that may have been at a higher level, I was really well grounded, and I think that's what we're finally doing for these folks. HR just started in February. It's a little different type of work, but we, in our kickoff meeting, the community that was on that call, in a matter of minutes, suggested 70 different gigs. So it's been stewing, and they are primed to do this, and it'll be fun to come back and talk about how that work aligns with this concept. And we're looking to the future. We're hoping to expand this when other job families are ready. I think it's not necessarily a career development plan, but it's giving employees their own initiative to seek out their future, and that's a powerful thing.
Without leaving and helping us at the same time. It's
Yeah.
just wonderful.
That's great, thank you. Regent Turner.
Thank you, Chair Wheeler. Thank you for asking that question about gig and then you clarifying, because when you said gig, the hairs on the back of my neck went up.
Oh, sorry.
Because in gig nursing is a whole different thing, and it's exactly what you had said, that it's not. It's farming out the work.
This is inside.
It's all inside, and so thank you for clarifying that.
This efficiency.
Yeah,
Giving
no.
our employees opportunities to try something new without leaving their job. And if there's a project that's needed, we don't have to pay, we're not going
Right.
outside. It's a wonderful program.
Right, this is where using acronyms for all sorts of different things, it gets to be a problem. And I've probably asked this question before, so pardon me if I've asked it last year and et cetera, but this employee engagement, do you give it to everybody? Do you have the unions fill it out too? Because I could see where it'd be nice to know if there's any problems brewing before you get to the contract table.
Yeah. Chair Wheeler, Regent Turner, I don't recall, I have a list of the questions you've asked me at home, by the way. No, I'm just, but I don't recall this. That's a good question. Union represented employees do take the survey. They can take the survey. And we do look at it from that perspective, but we also have regular meetings outside the contract process, as you know, where we can address some of those too. So there are multiple channels, but that is one that can help a unit identify maybe some things that that particular represented workforce may have issues with.
Okay. Great, thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
I appreciate your time. The next topic is to receive an update towards our sustainability across the university. So presenting this item will be Chief Sustainability Officer Shane Stennis. Executive Vice President Goldman, would you like to tee this up?
Thank you, Chair Wheeler and members of the committee. The next item is a progress report on our sustainability and energy efficiency targets. Sustainability is not a standalone initiative. It is central to our land-grant mission and a pillar of our Elevate Extraordinary 2025 strategic roadmap. I want to thank Chief Sustainability Officer Shane Stennis and his team for their leadership. Their work has moved us from the planning phase to measurable impact. Under Shane's direction, the university now ranks in the top 10% worldwide in the Times Higher Education Sustainability Impact Rankings. Shane will get more into the rankings and the accolades, but I will note that these efforts build on our research excellence to deliver bold, long-term solutions for the state of Minnesota. We're grateful for the exceptional work of him and his team. I'll turn it over to Chief Sustainability Officer Shane Sturness to walk us through the highlights. Shane?
Thank you, VP Goldman. Thank you, Chair Wheeler and members of the committee. It's a pleasure to be here with you today to present the annual report on sustainability and energy efficiency, performance, and targets. Since 2004, university sustainability efforts have been guided by the board's policy, sustainability, and energy efficiency. The policy establishes 6 guiding principles and directs the administration to develop objectives and targets in the 5 operational areas of sustainability listed on the slide. Today's presentation will report on progress in implementing the policy, highlight efforts over the past year, and seek input from the committee on how to extend and expand sustainability related to campus operations. The policy's guiding principles call for pollution prevention, reduction of emissions, and reduced dependence on non-renewable energy resources. These aims are advanced through the university's commitment to climate change and to address it through our operations. Over the past 3 years, the university has developed climate action plans detailing how each campus will address climate change through those campus operations. And these plans were developed with the support of external service providers and integrated with campus land use planning. Plan development involved extensive consultation with each campus's students, faculty, staff, and leadership. The plans were previously presented to the board and are now incorporated as key early actions in the Elevate Extraordinary 2030 strategic roadmap. The emissions reduction goals shown on the screen are planned to occur over the next 10 to 15 years, and each plan is developed from a different baseline year. And the sources of emissions reductions, as well as where our emissions predominantly come from, are in the categories shown on the right of the slide. The plans also detail how each campus will adapt to the impacts of climate change. As place-based institutions, our campuses will be subject to a future climate in our lifetimes very different than the present. That climate will be typified by increased temperatures, more severe weather, and intense precipitation. Each climate action plan details strategies for adapting and becoming more resilient to these changes on our campuses, in our community, within the environment, and our built infrastructure. And some of the strategies in common across all the plans are summarized on this slide on the left. We are already translating these plans into action. Since 2020, we have decreased emissions from campus by more than 80,000 tons of pollution. University efforts like purchasing renewable electricity, providing the transit pass to students and employees on the Twin Cities campus, and maximizing utility rebate programs for energy efficiency have all played a critical role. The pandemic also reduced emissions some, as you'll see on the chart. Although university activities have largely returned to pre-pandemic levels and enrollment and campus size university-wide have increased over this time, we have maintained those lower emissions, which is a real testament, I think, to the impact of the strategies and the efforts by university staff, faculty, and students. To meet the commitments, though, on our climate action plans and the success measures of Elevate Extraordinary 2030, we must accelerate implementation of our emissions reduction strategies. In addition to work on climate action, the university is advancing other areas of activity identified in board policy. For the past few years, we have used 2 external assessment tools to measure our progress on this front. The first tool is the Times Higher Ed Impact Rankings, which EVP Goldman had referenced. These measure university contributions to the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. The spring 2025 results are shown on the left, and the 2026 results will be released this June. The second tool is the Sustainability Tracking Assessment and Rating System, which is a mouthful, so we use an acronym called STARS. The next few slides will focus on STARS as it is widely used by US institutions and provides robust assessment of sustainability in campus operations. Our goal over the past few years has been for each campus to earn a gold rating on the STARS tool, and I'm happy to report that 4 of 5 campuses have achieved this milestone. I'd also like to note the Rochester campus completed the STARS assessment for the very first time this past year, achieving a rating of silver. The STARS assessment is a challenging tool, and many institutions never achieve a silver rating. That Rochester was able to do so on its first submission should be lauded and sets a great foundation for future efforts and will get us to that next level of performance. STARS evaluates participating campuses comprehensively across all domains of university activity. This table shows the % of possible points earned by campus in category out of 100. Relatively speaking, our academic scores across campuses are where we score the highest, and the operations category scores are typically the lowest. This relative relationship of scores is consistent with our peer institutions, as well as the highest performing institutions on STARS. The academic measures are generally easier to move more quickly, with operations metrics often being tied to infrastructure that is more time and resource intensive to alter. I will note that we are not yet at the highest rating possible in STARS, which is platinum, and increasing our ratings to this level will require additional concerted effort to improve performance in at least 2 or more categories. This slide breaks down the operations category further into its subcomponents referred to as impact areas. Again, results are shown by campus and as a percentage of possible points earned out of 100. Across campuses, key improvement opportunities in operations include emissions reduction, renewable energy supply, energy efficiency, and sustainability procurement and transportation. Implementation of the climate plans I mentioned earlier will advance our performance in impact areas like energy, climate, transportation, and buildings. Improving in other areas such as grounds, food and dining, procurement, and waste will require increased capacity to develop, implement, and sustain improvements. Numbers don't tell the whole story, though, as we know, so I want to wrap up by sharing one highlight per campus, starting with Crookston. Restoring windbreaks are a key strategy of the Crookston Climate Action Plan, and a strategy that resonated with this board when we presented the plan to you in December of 2024. This past year, we were able to secure a grant from the state of Minnesota to cover 95% of the cost of this work. The effort has already engaged faculty and students in the planning process and in implementation, and provides opportunities for scholarship and applied learning, and the planting of over 800 new trees will begin this May. Duluth recently completed a renovation of their main kitchen production facility. Not only does this enable the campus to continue providing delicious and nutritious meals to students, but it's also doing so in a more sustainable and energy efficient facility. This project incorporated the state of Minnesota's sustainable building guidelines and pursued ambitious energy conservation in its scope. All of Minnesota, and indeed the world, is in the midst of a massive energy transformation, deploying cleaner energy sources derived from the wind, sun, and earth. Morris is leading the way on this effort with 2 wind turbines and over 500 kilowatts of on-campus solar. It's already getting 100% of its electricity from renewable sources. And it's exploring and demonstrating technologies to store this electricity for later use. Through this work, it's de-risking technology and building local expertise that helps communities and businesses develop the economic engine of tomorrow. The box in the photo may not look exciting, but it contains a thermal energy storage technology that may be the key to the energy transition in the Midwest. This project is a partnership with Grid Catalyst, Minnesota's clean tech accelerator, and it recently attracted the attention and coverage of the Wall Street Journal. As mentioned previously, Rochester took a critical step in the last year to conduct their first sustainability assessment, establishing a baseline for future action, identifying critical improvement opportunities, and earning a silver rating. One of the critical improvement opportunities that was identified is really around student engagement. And to advance this work, student interns have been hired in the past year with an interest in the intersection of sustainability and health. Their efforts are already making a difference, and they're developing and hosting well-attended opportunities for students to expand their knowledge and passion for these topics. As an example, next week, one of the interns is organizing an opportunity for Rochester students to meet with and hear from the Mayo Clinic Sustainability Director. For many years, Waste Recovery Services at the Twin Cities, a Department of Facilities Management, has been working with athletics to minimize the impact on the environment and communities of the waste created from home football games and large events. Last year, this effort hit an important milestone. Over 90% of waste was recycled or composted from the Farm Aid concert as well as a home football game. Coincidentally, the amount of waste managed at Farm Aid is comparable to the daily average on campus. Every day, university staff are collecting, hauling, and processing 55,000 pounds of waste. Waste Recovery Services has translated these lessons learned from Huntington Bank and other insights into a plan for how to expand this work to campus at large, and we'll be working on implementation of that roadmap in the months and years ahead. And finally, across the university, energy and utility plans are underway. This planning activity, expect to be complete in this calendar year, is identifying the specific infrastructure needed to support the mission, advance our climate goals, and ensure our campuses are competitive throughout the 21st century. In closing, as we look ahead to the coming year, we are focused on 4 key things in sustainability. First, we will advance the sustainability-related focus areas and key early actions in Elevate Extraordinary 2030, including implementation of the climate action plans. Second, the impact ratings have announced changes, and the Carnegie organization launched a new sustainability assessment this past year. We will evaluate and determine a course of action regarding both of these developments. Third, I have to confess we are currently at capacity. If we want to achieve higher levels of performance, such as Zero Waste or STARS Platinum, we will need to identify those strategic operational priorities and dedicate resources to those efforts. And finally, we have initiated a comprehensive review of the board's policy and intend to return to you in the fall with recommended amendments. The policy adopted in 2004 is more than 2 decades old and has not been amended since it was created. Revisions will better prepare us for the coming decades ahead. And with that, I conclude my presentation. I look forward to your questions, comments, and feedback. Thank you.
Great, thank you so much for this. Hard not to get excited about it, talk about a win-win on these things. So Regent Goldberg-Luger.
Thank you, Chair Wheeler. And first of all, thank you for the amazing work. I think this is super exciting. And I also, there is so much focus on climate these days. So where does the University of Minnesota as a system stand out? And how are we communicating that to the region, to the state, to prospective students, to stakeholders? You know, how are we elevating that message?
Chair Wheeler, Regent Lugar, thank you for the question. I think we stand out in a number of different ways. Academically, we rate very highly on the Times Higher Ed Impact Rankings in terms of our academic capabilities around climate. And so you often find our faculty members as expert testifiers before the legislature, actively engaged in the community and working with businesses, local government, state government, and other entities around how are they seeing climate change show up? How do we provide our scientific expertise and our technological expertise and our social science expertise around those challenges? So that's one way I think that we really stand out. And then I think the other thing that I would highlight is really the performance. So if we look further back in terms of our greenhouse gas emissions history, we've cut our emissions 50% since 2008. There are very few higher ed institutions in the country that can say that. There are very few organizations in Minnesota that can say that. And that is due to a lot of different factors, including innovations that I talked about today that you see at Morris, but certainly a lot of sort of just behind the scenes work by staff at the institution trying to make the physical plant more efficient and trying to find ways to bring renewable energy into our supply. So we're reducing that emissions footprint and really tackling it. And then finally, it is resilience, right? So we are place-based institutions. And so we are going to have to adapt to climate change, and we have some really exceptional efforts. And I had the good fortune of having President Cunningham at a climate resilience teach-in earlier this week, where we kicked off and sort of commemorated and celebrated some of that work and engaged the university community in some of that work. So I think those are like 3 kind of core things I would bring to the fore.
So I'm just curious, it's great to hear it here. Mm-hmm. How is our state, how is our region understanding that we're the place to be for this, for climate?
Wow. Chair Wheeler, Regent Lugar, it is a great question. The way that I think it's getting out on the academic side, one of the things that we have an organization at the university called the Climate Adaptation Partnership. I think they're a good illustration of this. They have built a climate extension educators program that is interfacing with our extension agents across the state to bring this expertise through the extension service to communities around Minnesota. That's one highlight. And I think the other piece is really providing opportunities to learn through doing, to use our campus facilities and the progress we're making there as demonstration. So another great example of this is we will, in 2 weeks' time, I think, be bringing people who work in the facility space in higher education across the state and the region. They're having a workshop and a tour on campus of our new AOC facility, which actually has no fossil fuel combustion in it. It's a computing facility where we're harvesting all the waste energy heat from the computers and then using it to heat other buildings on campus. And so we're showcasing some of this technology as a way of demonstrating here are practices that other communities can adopt, especially relevant with the AI boom, and trying to find ways to take all that heat that is being created by AI infrastructure and then bring it into communities to support their needs as well. So.
President Cunningham.
Yeah, Chair Wheeler, and thank you so much for the presentation. And to Regent Luger's question, and also just to your presentation, I mean, this is amazing. We are decades ahead of our peers across the country. Like, I just can't tell you, you know that well. There's many places that don't have offices, let alone a policy that's 2 decades old that needs to be redone. I mean, there's been so much work done here. It's really tremendous, but I do think we have the opportunity, I'm looking at my Vice President of Communications, to highlight this more. It's part of our identity. You're doing a good job in your office of pushing it out there, but this has to be part of our identity for how we move ahead with our students and attracting them going forward. It is important to a lot of both of our students and faculty that they are at an organization and at a place that is really climate-minded and minded with sustainability, and we indeed are that place. I'll continue to use our new slogan, that we will leave a future for the planet and our students going forward by our ability to have such a sustainable campus and opportunity. But I do think we need to call it out more in our identity. Morris has done a pretty good job, I think, of this actually in their work, which has been tremendous, and so has actually Duluth, and some of our campuses have begun to call it out in a, maybe not begun, but has been part of their attraction. But I think we can do more here in announcing this. I have to say, and I was saying this a lot when I first came, and less now, it has been sort of a well-kept secret that we're really good at it. Like it's just so expected here. That we don't sing it enough. It is clearly called out in the Elevate Extraordinary Plan, and as something that we are quite excellent in, that we want to continue to elevate. And I know there's an action group working on that. And with that, hopefully we'll see also more communications and thinking around how we announce that to our both in the state and then to our students and families.
Great. Thank you. Regent Hipsch.
Okay. On that, thank you. So hard question, and small scale atomic energy, small modular, it's pretty green, actually, no carbon dioxide, and for a society that's requiring more and more energy. I know Finland, France, other places are using it, Romania. What are your thoughts there, and should we be on the cusp and the cutting edge of putting that in, maybe in Crookston where we need a whole new plant, where we could also power the town and sell energy and be a leading edge on it. I know I got an engineer right next to me, that lawyer, that's probably got more to say about this than I do. But anyways, because I've been watching this thing, and I think it's, it's not as cheap as atomic energy full scale, but there's also less nuclear waste, and there's more recyclable waste, and it's fairly safe because they're made in a factory. So just your thoughts on that. Yeah. And then I'm going to turn it to Cody to get her thoughts.
Chair Wheeler, Regent Hipsch. So it's a topic that I'm actively tracking. I think there's a couple things that sort of strike me as relevant sort of upfront considerations. One is state law currently doesn't allow the development of any more nuclear energy in the state. So that's an active conversation at the legislature right now. And I know there's been discussion about potentially kicking off a study to look at opportunities and the techno-economic sort of feasibility and other considerations around that. So I think that would be an important first step as we look for the state to signal sort of that piece of it. I think the other piece is technologically small SMRs, small modular reactors. There haven't been any built yet. So I don't think we're in a position where we want to be first on that. And certainly, while it's a really promising development, we're just starting to see the first installations get licensed in Canada and the first installations being considered for licensure in the United States. So I think we're still sort of at that early stage in scale. Other higher ed institutions are tracking this who have existing nuclear energy programs where they're educating nuclear energy engineers as part of their academic disciplines. And I think they're further ahead. And so we will also look to our peers in this space to see what their lessons learned are and what might be transferable to a Minnesota context. But that's further out. Yeah.
Just to follow. Well, I thought Rolls-Royce in the UK was making one, and I thought France and already had them in Finland. I mean, so we're falling behind, or as in the North America, is that what's happening, or what?
Chair Wheeler, Regent Hipsch, I think that those installations there's kind of two classes of SMR. One is sort of 300 megawatt size-ish and 100 megawatts. None of our loads are that big on campus. Okay. We're much more in the 1 to 2 to 3. The Twin Cities campus is probably a 50, right? So we're not the next scale down in tier in terms of the reactor development. There are ones being developed in that space, but they're still sort of earlier stage. They're okay. Kind of I don't know if they're pre-commercialization or first demonstration sort of scale at this point.
Thank you.
We'll take two more. Regent Turner.
Thank you, Chair Wheeler. The operational numbers, okay, and you said yourself that we're at capacity and all that kind of stuff. Are you going to give us like a little honey-do list as to what this is? Because we can say what a great job we're doing, academic-wise and all the other kind of stuff, but the reality is right now, as the world starts to just burn up, is we need to move faster on this operational thing. And so maybe I'm not real savvy on what the foundation does or doesn't do, but if we had a concise list of stuff that we could then get people to donate so that we could move the numbers on this operational thing, because that's the column that really matters now.
Yeah. Chair Wheeler, Regent Turner, I'll just take that as an invitation to provide a list. So
you got my permission. There you go.
As part of the Elevate Extraordinary 2030 process, one of the focus areas and the key early action items is around the climate action plans and sustainability. And so we're currently in the process of translating that planning document and planning intent into what are the key actions that we would recommend moving forward. So that'll come through the Elevate Extraordinary process for sure.
And Regent Verhalen.
Thank you.
And with an engineering perspective, you can do that as well. Yeah.
We don't have enough time in the I really appreciate the presentation, and particularly always appreciate a good governance and policy bullet in a presentation. So to that point, your slides identify a comprehensive review of the Board of Regents policy on sustainability and energy efficiency. I'm very happy to see that, to make sure that our policies are aligning with Elevate Extraordinary and in the reverse as well. But do ask that as you complete, this is more of an ask than a question, and if you do have a response, please feel free. Ask that in that comprehensive review, please don't hesitate to come to us with real concrete items that we should consider in that policy, or whether they're items that may not belong in the policy but may belong in an action list or some sort of directive, guidelines, et cetera, out of that. It's not very often we get to see someone in front of us who is looking forward to a comprehensive review of a Board of Regents policy.
Other than Jason.
Other than Jason, yes. And so just want to open that door there and make it very clear, like I, at least as chair of government policy, want that feedback. Let us know what you're thinking, what you're seeing, if there's anything in there that's hindering or maybe not opening as many doors as it could.
Okay. I appreciate that. Thank you, Regent Barry-Allen.
Great, a great request and a great discussion. Thank you very much. All right, we'll move on to our next item, which is to review proposed amendments related to our institutional reserves and investment of assets. As you recall, in February, we had a discussion where we talked about the rationale of doing so, but we're going to be walked through, not the rationale again, but walk through the amendments. So Vice President for Finance, Michael Volna, and Associate Vice President Andrew Parks will be here. And I think Executive Vice President Goldman, you want to kick this off as well.
All right. Thank you, Chair Wheeler and members of the committee. Our next item is the review of the proposed revisions to two Board of Regent policies governing university reserves and investment of reserves. When we discussed the concept of a new policy framework in February, we talked about the need to move beyond a narrow, segmented view of central reserves towards a more integrated, enterprise-wide lens. Recent economic volatility has proven that our financial resilience depends on how we manage our liquid assets and also consider less liquid assets as part of the toolkit for responding to financial shocks. The proposal before you today formalizes a three-tiered structure that organizes assets by accessibility and return profiles. I want to emphasize, as I did in February, this is not a change in our fiscal philosophies or practices. Rather, it's a formalization of practices that were already in place and a modernization of our governance to align with Treasury best practices and the metrics used by major rating agencies. Based on our discussions in February, we've incorporated several key points into today's presentation, including definition of the assets included in each of the three tiers, elimination of the general contingency from the policy, benchmarking data at minimum levels of sufficiency for Tier 1, and ongoing reporting and monitoring requirements. Joining me today are Mike Vona, Vice President and Assistant CFO, and Andrew Parks, Associate Vice President and Chief Investment Officer. We're not going to give you a new title, Andrew. Yeah, you got enough to do. Andrew, I turn it over to you to begin the discussion on the policy language.
Thank you, EVP Goldman. Thank you, Chair Wheeler, and good afternoon to everyone. So Mike and I are back to review the draft capital reserves and liquidity management policy. If approved, this new document will consolidate our two existing policies, central reserves and investment of reserves, into a single unified framework that's designed to more comprehensively monitor and more effectively manage our financial reserves, ensuring that we maintain liquidity necessary to meet our daily operational needs while also preserving a buffer to ensure that we can handle both minor and major potential financial shocks. As you will see on your slide 98, our plan is to provide a brief refresh on the key takeaways from the presentation that we walked through with you all in February, after which we'll shift to the proposed policy with Mike reviewing the key provisions in Articles 1 and 2, which focus on the policy's objectives and the proposed three-tiered framework that EVP Goldman referenced. And then I'll do the same in reviewing the key provisions in Article 3, which function as the de facto investment policy statement for the short and medium-term pools. With, I believe, 40 minutes on the agenda, Mike and I plan to present for roughly 20 to 25 minutes to ensure we leave plenty of time for discussion. But as always, we'd certainly welcome your input and questions, so feel free to jump in at any point. So to provide a quick refresh on what we discussed back in February, I'll highlight 5 points. The first, just why are we reviewing this policy today? So the practical administrative reason is that the two existing policies were due for their scheduled comprehensive review. But more substantively, these policies really formally recognize the importance of the university maintaining sufficient and ready access to capital, as doing so helps to ensure financial stability and resilience, especially in times of stress. Second, we believe that shifting away from the current governance structure, which is siloed and limited in scope, encompassing only about 20% of university financial assets, to one that's integrated and enterprise-wide, encompassing 100% of the university's financial assets, will both A, improve the ability of the board and senior leadership to understand the strength of our financial posture at any point in time, and B, empower the administration to more effectively operationalize the oversight of these reserve pools. As I noted in February, this approach is more pragmatic, as it views our financial posture as a complete mosaic. It's more flexible, and that it better positions us to optimize funding sources and uses, and it's more strategic, as it provides the tools necessary to leverage our full balance sheet. That said, I also want to underscore the point that Mike made in February and that Greg just repeated, that this proposed framework is not a fundamental shift in policy or practice, but instead it represents a codification of our longstanding practices. So it's making explicit that which is implicit. And that we've always looked at the full financial mosaic or toolkit when addressing both minor and major financial events. Third, a key mechanism for ensuring financial stability and resilience is maintaining a diversified mix of both internal and external sources of capital. So internal via accessing our reserve pools, and external via accessing the debt capital markets, as this gives us optionality and lowers the likelihood that we'll be forced to have to use one source or the other at an inopportune time. Fourth, these concepts and principles translate directly into our proposed three-tiered framework, which is aimed at effectively aligning sources and uses of capital. With Tier 1 designed to tap into easy-to-access, low cost of capital reserves for the purpose of covering the high-frequency but lower order of magnitude events, and Tier 3 vice versa, tapping into harder-to-access, higher cost of capital reserves for the purposes of covering the less frequent but higher order of magnitude financial events. As I mentioned in February, in short, Tier 1 is the everyday liquidity bucket, Tier 2 is the rainy day bucket, and Tier 3 is really the Armageddon scenario bucket. Lastly, we reviewed the asset levels under this proposed three-tiered framework as of the end of fiscal year 25 and concluded that they signal modest strength, reflecting not a fortress balance sheet, but a structure designed for shock absorption. Our expendable financial resources, so think of Tiers 1 and Tiers 2 combined, represent about 3/4 of a year's worth of our operating expenses. So we have the liquidity and the reserves to weather a significant short-term hit. However, if a shock proved to be persistent, not just episodic, we would eventually have to realign our business model through budget or expenditure reductions to account for that new reality. I will note that in part, to be responsive to Regent Mohammed's question about how these levels compare to peer institutions, we did include some additional data in the supplemental slides, which we can touch on time permitting, that include a look at how we're positioned both versus peers and versus our own historical levels dating back to 2018. So with that preamble in mind, I will turn it over to Mike to walk through the highlights of Articles 1 and 2.
Thank you, Andrew. Appreciate it. I want to start by saying that, as he said, this emanated from 2 comprehensive reviews, and I want the committee to know how much I've looked forward to those comprehensive reviews.
That's all you're going to say?
Back to Andrew. Another thing that we were able to achieve through this, in addition to the comprehensive review, is consolidate 2 existing policies into one. The resulting policy, which you have a draft of in front of you, is a little different than what you typically see. You would normally see a red line, but because this is really a kind of a reconstruction of something new, you don't see a red line. What you see really is the draft of the consolidated policies. So the policy that's in front of you really has 3 articles. Article 1 represents the scope, guiding principles, and definitions. That's very common in board policy. Article 2 contains the content that generally replaces our current central reserves policy. And Article 3 aligns with the current investment of reserves policy. I'd like to start by touching on just a few things in Article 1. So as I said, Article 1 is really scope, guiding principles, and definitions. In the draft policy that you have, they have been aligned with this new framework that is broader than central reserves. So a lot of the central reserves language that's in the current policy goes away. The definitions have been beefed up. If you look at the current policy, there really is just one short paragraph that defines a few things, but this is a very nice laying out of all of the elements of the policy that need to be defined. I want to highlight 2 things, as Andrew touched on. Central reserves as a concept goes away, and we're replacing it with what we call the institutional income reserve. It is the same set of accounts that you used to think of and look at as central reserves, but it represents a better description of how those accounts are really put together and managed. In addition to that, you as a board would typically see a report almost every month, depending on the activity, for general contingency. That was a subset of central reserves, which was a subset of really what we are presenting to you today. And so because it is so small, and because the board has taken on recently the activities to raise your thresholds and focus more on big picture, we are eliminating general contingencies as something that would be reported to you periodically. We will talk a little bit later on in Article 2 about the reporting you will see and how we will provide stuff to you. So let's move to Article 2. So here's a slide that just gives you a brief kind of touching on the highlights, but I'm going to go through it a little bit more in detail. So Article 2 really is the heart of the new framework. The tiers are listed in Section 1. It contains the core concept of the 3 tiers. A key point is that Tier 1 has clear metrics. Tiers 2 and 3, you will note, do not have clear metrics, and there's a reason for that. The reason is that Tier 1 is there and is managed for the sole purpose defined in the policy, to provide liquidity and cash for both operations and short-term emergencies. The assets that you find in tiers 2 and tier 3 are really managed for and used for other purposes. In terms of this policy, yes, we would look to them, but we don't buy and build buildings to liquidate them. We buy and build buildings, which would be in tier 3, to achieve the mission, teaching, research, outreach. So we don't manage them for liquidity, we manage them for other purposes. Therefore, we're not suggesting that there should be a metric because we're not going to manage them to this metric. We will manage those assets to their original core purpose. Another key point is that the assets in tier 1 are well defined. The assets in tier 2, if you look at the policy, it's an additive sort of definition. And the reason for that is because over time, the composition and the nature of those assets tends to change. And if you build into the policy the exact definition of everything, then when those change, we need to come back and change the policy. So we would propose achieving your oversight and an understanding of what's in those tiers every year by defining for you what we have in them at that point in time and reporting on the values. I would note finally, in talking about this, is section 1, is that our tier 1 metric, if you were to compare it to what you might see with Moody's or Standard & Poor's, it's lower. And that's because what we're including is a different definition than what they include. What they include is something close to what Andrew said, which is total expendable resources. We've been more precise in this. So our number is smaller than what they have for us if you were to look at, let's say, one of our ratings reports. But it's completely reconcilable, and we will be able to provide you with sort of comparable data when we report to you on these metrics. Any questions so far?
Regent Luger.
Thank you, Chair Wheeler, and you can just say Regent Luger, it's fine. I just have a question with respect to the rating agencies. Will this change in policy affect our credit rating?
Chair Wheeler and Regent Luger, actually, it will not, but I think it will be a positive. Because what we're seeing is that actually very few universities have so well-defined and thought-out policies. And if nothing else, what rating agencies want to know is, if you have a problem, how are you going to handle it? And this policy provides the framework for how we would handle it. So I think it'll be a positive. Okay, so Section 2 of Article 2 then covers the reservations and delegations. The board retains authority for 2 primary things. One, to approve budgets for and spending from the institutional income reserve. And that's very comparable to what you have today with central reserves. The board also, and this is new, the board also retains authority to set the minimum amount and level of the Tier 1 reserve. And we think that's appropriate for you to have that governance and fiduciary responsibility for making sure you're comfortable with that. Beyond that, the delegations then delegate everything to the president, which again is pretty comparable to what's in the current policy around central reserves. And if you look at what we've spelled out, much of the delegations represent administrative or managerial functions that you would never expect the board to actually be doing themselves. And then finally, Article 2, Section 3 deals with reporting. This is where we're going to be reporting back to you on various aspects. And we intend to do that 2 ways. First, the reporting on the institutional income reserve, much like today with central reserves, will be done during the annual budgeting process. You will see what is budgeted in the institutional income reserve and how we intend to use it. The other piece of the reporting, which will involve reporting on the tiers, the assets that are in them, the values for those assets, will occur either in the annual asset management report that Andrew and the Office of Investment and Banking do, or in our annual capital financing and debt management report. Last time in February, a suggestion was made, I think, by EVP Goldman that we develop a dashboard, and we absolutely can and will do that. We just want to make sure we don't tiptoe into that until we've actually kind of finalized the policy. Other questions then? I'm done with Articles 1 and 2, and I want to make sure we have time for questions.
Just a reminder, this is a good time for feedback on this because this is for discussion and review today and for likely, approval come June.
Okay, I will turn it over to Andrew for Article 3.
All right, thank you, Mike. So as I mentioned earlier, Article 3 effectively functions as the de facto investment policy statement for the short and medium-term reserve pools. So it outlines the investment objectives, portfolio characteristics, investment guidelines, and prohibitions that govern the management of the program. So think of it as the investment roadmap. It lays out the destination we're aiming for, clarifies the path we're going to take, and sets out the guardrails to ensure that we stay on the road and within the appropriate risk tolerances. So in reviewing this article, I'll focus my comments on those three primary areas. So first, the objectives of the program, second, the investment strategy and portfolio design, and third, the guardrails, so the limitations and prohibitions that are imposed. So starting with the objectives, the short-term reserve pool represents really the lifeblood of the university's financial system. So it's on average about 3/4 of the Tier 1 assets that Mike was just alluding to. So it's the primary vehicle we utilize to pay the bills. Referencing back to the February meeting when we went through that personal financial analog, think of it as the university's checking account. So the programmatic objectives are to maintain sufficient liquidity, to meet these funding needs, and to provide backup liquidity for our debt programs. Those programmatic objectives then drive the investment objectives, which are listed in this policy as being 1, capital preservation, 2, income generation, and 3, seeking market commensurate returns on invested capital. So more simply, 1, don't lose money, 2, don't let the cash sit idle so that we can earn realized income that we can spend each fiscal year, and 3, earn appropriate total returns given the conservative risk profile. So with those investment objectives in mind, let's talk about the strategy and portfolio design. So the key point to keep in mind is that the investment strategy is focused on finding the optimal balance between liquidity and return. So between preserving capital and being able to readily access that capital on one hand, and generating returns on that capital that can increase our spending power on the other hand. So if you look at the representative portfolio mix that I've included here on slide 104, you'll see that as we go from left to right along this risk and return continuum, we go from the most liquid but lowest returning to the least liquid but highest returning of investment options. So the core portfolio, the left side of this continuum, which today is about 80%, tilts more heavily toward favoring liquidity over return. So now you can create liquidity in 4 ways. You can sit in cash, which is the most liquid. 2, you can buy a bond and sell it before it matures. 3, you can buy a bond and get some partial liquidity by waiting until you get a coupon or interest payment. And 4, you can buy a bond and hold it until it matures, at which point you get all of your money back. So we focus on generating liquidity using the latter 2 and not the former 2. So holding cash has a significant opportunity cost in the form of foregone interest, and selling a bond before it matures creates risk that you might have to sell it at an inopportune time. So when interest rates go up, bond prices by definition go down, so you can be forced to sell it at a loss, and we don't want to do that. We instead manage liquidity in small part by forecasting and tracking when coupon and interest payments will be coming in, but mainly through staggering or laddering the maturities of our bonds with near-term liquidity in mind. I remember in February, Student Representative Ellis asked a great question about how we stress test the portfolio. And in responding, I mentioned that we look at the maximum peak to trough decline in a given day, in a given week, in a given month, in a given quarter, and then we add to it consideration for the maximum amount of commercial paper that can be rolled over at any point in time. And we do that to arrive upon a liquidity cushion that we feel like we need to maintain at all times. And that ends up being about $500 million. So it's about 1/4 to 1/3 of the portfolio. So back to my comment about staggering or laddering the maturities of our bonds, as of a few days ago, about half of the portfolio is scheduled to mature in calendar year 26. More specifically, 1/4 of it, over $500 million, is set to mature in April and May. So we're intentionally building in natural and recurring liquidity, aligning the investment portfolio with the programmatic needs of the pool to ensure we satisfy the objectives that I outlined. So that's really the rationale behind how we build and construct the core portfolio. Now, the growth part of the portfolio, the right side of this continuum, which is today about 20%, tilts more heavily toward favoring return over liquidity. These are investments in higher octane private credit strategies and in the endowment, the latter of which pays out 4.5% yield each year, and also has the potential for greater market appreciation. As an anecdote, last year, the overall short-term pool generated a record payout to central reserves of nearly 80 million, due largely to favorably high short-term interest rates, but also meaningfully due to the investments that we made in this growth bucket. So it was only about 18% of the total capital in the pool, but it generated over 30% of the total gains last fiscal year. So sized appropriately and managed prudently, it can have a meaningful impact. So in summary, I do believe that the mix within and between the core and the growth components of the portfolio do optimally balance these liquidity and return objectives. Now, lastly, I want to discuss the guardrails that are in place. So the limitations and prohibitions that are included in the policy to ensure that we stay on course. So these guardrails are designed so that if the market's moved against us, or hopefully, heaven forbid, we make a poor investment decision, any resulting impact, while tangible, remains manageable and recoverable without jeopardizing our ability to fulfill the core programmatic objectives. Now, there are, by my count, 17 distinct limitations included in the policy, so I won't review them all, but I do want to touch on 4 of them. The first is duration, which is a measure of interest rate sensitivity. It's measured in years, and it can be generally interpreted as the amount of time it would take if you invested in a bond to get your money back. So the higher the number, the higher the interest rate sensitivity, and vice versa. The policy states that the weighted average duration of the portfolio should be no more than 4 years, and that there should not be a single bond that has a duration of more than 7 years. Now, our actual duration has been closer to 1.5 years, so significantly under that cap, but we think it's an appropriate guardrail to have in place. Second is credit risk. So conventional wisdom is that U.S. Treasury securities are the only risk-free asset in the world, with all other fixed income instruments carrying some form of credit risk. I'll resist the urge to editorialize about the soundness of that assumption going forward, given the current and projected levels of federal debt. But setting that aside, the simplest way to monitor credit risk is to look at the ratings given to a credit by the 3 major rating agencies, who all basically use the same conceptual rating scale with some minor differences in nomenclature. So anything rated AAA down to BBB- is considered investment grade. Anything below that, so from BB+ to D, is considered high yield or junk bond status. So the policy as written states that our average credit quality should be no less than A rated, which is right in the middle of the investment grade spectrum and is considered upper medium grade. So to put that in context, over longer periods of time, the average default rate for A-rated issuers is about 5 basis points. So it's 5 issuers out of every 10,000. So we think it's an appropriately conservative way to structure the portfolio while still giving us the ability to generate some excess returns over the Treasury market. I'll also note that we are precluded from directly buying any high yield or junk bond securities. Third relates to the internally managed funds category, which you'll see in this slide. So we've defined that as portfolio assets for which security selection, execution, and ongoing monitoring are conducted in-house by members of my team rather than delegated to an external investment manager. So this is one way that we're able to save some money, because by having a dedicated trader in-house managing a sizable portion of the program, we're able to avoid paying higher investment manager fees. And operationally, it's really helpful because we're more easily and effectively able to ensure that cash isn't sitting idle. So by really every single morning, we're looking at what uninvested cash we have and we're deploying it. As of late, that's been close to $50 to $100 million per day. So while there are benefits to having in-house management, importantly, we need to understand what our core competencies are, and we need to ensure that we're aware of our resource limitations. So one dedicated trader, no matter how competent, can't effectively track and invest in the full breadth of the fixed income markets. And so we intentionally narrow our scope to make sure we don't get out over our proverbial skis. So we limit what we can invest in internally to sovereign securities, predominantly U.S. Treasuries and agencies, and corporate debt, predominantly commercial paper. So the policy states that we can't invest in high yield, emerging market debt, structured products to the extent that we think those are attractive opportunity sets. We exploit them through external investment managers. Lastly, there's a 30% cap, as you'll see here, on the amount of capital that we can allocate to the higher risk and less liquid growth allocation. Today, we're just shy of 20%, and I wouldn't anticipate us getting much over 25% on a steady state basis. It is the ultimate, I'd say, siren's call, because it is an area where we can generate the most excess return but riskier things are riskier for a reason. They don't always turn out the way you would underwrite, and liquidity of those investments can end up being worse than planned for. So we do think, given the conservative nature of the overall program's objectives, it's an appropriate tether to have in place. So in closing, I believe Article 3 of this policy really accomplishes 4 key goals. So one is it provides strategic clarity by articulating the programmatic and investment objectives of the reserve pools. 2, it effectively explains how we should balance the competing priorities of liquidity and return. 3, it provides operational empowerment by giving me and my team the tools and the toolkit to bring the best of our institutional capabilities to bear to best position the portfolio to meet its objectives. And 4, it does this all while ensuring the appropriate risk constraints are in place to give the board, rated agencies, other stakeholders the comfort and confidence that the program will be managed prudently. So that concludes our prepared remarks. So Mike and I would be happy to respond to any other questions that the board may have.
Great, thank you very much. Any further questions, discussion points? Representative Verhalen.
I do have one, and it's probably a really technical question, so I apologize. The proposal is to increase the cash on hand days from 69 to 75. But when I look at, it's page 111 of our materials, it's in your supplemental slides, it's the 2-tier, tier 1, tier 2, in our 6-year history going back to 2018. It doesn't look like we've dropped below that 69-day threshold, and I'm just curious as to what's driving the request to 75. Is it to move us more in line with our peers? Is it just what you all are seeing? And then is 75 days sufficient should there be some major market issue?
Chair Wheeler and Regent Verhalen, 75 we think is an appropriate number because 69 is actual, maybe an average actual. We want to have a little bit of a buffer on top of that. So we think that 75 is the right number. And as I said, I think if you look in some of these slides at some of the other graphs we've got, the way that rating agencies look at us and kind of report on our metrics are different than the way we're doing it. So we have plenty of liquidity for short-term shocks. 75 is the right number compared to 69. We don't want to be on the number. We want to have a buffer.
Great.
I would just underscore, it's a floor, not a target. And so I think as a practical matter with the technical definition of days cash on hand, we've averaged around 140 days. If we use this definition, we've been pretty consistently still north of 100. So I think it was intended to find the right balance between acknowledging when we would actually hit the panic button and say, you all as a board should know where we're at and we need to talk about remediation efforts, versus a number that might be higher that would lead us to come back maybe more frequently in a way that wouldn't be helpful. So we thought it struck that right balance. The other, given it was a technical question, there are technical differences. We are looking at this relative to expenses, not just the prior structure was relative to revenues, which we thought was a little bit disconnected. And so that also explains some of the difference. The other thing, last thing I will add is that the days cash on hand, we do add to it $175 million, which is the maximum amount of commercial paper that can roll in any given week. So it does create another kind of threshold on top of that.
Great, thank you.
EVP Golden.
Chair Wheeler, Regent Verhalen, another way to look at it is if we ever get to that point as an industry or as a country, so if we got there in what I would call the slow drip, which unfortunately one of my past institutions did after I left, that's just unfortunate management. And if we got here due to a national catastrophe or a world catastrophe, I think 75, 100, 125 is not going to make a huge difference. And I think we want to draw the balance between what's appropriate to not have to keep coming back to the board, but also what's appropriate for where we think we are within our industry, and this kind of hit that sweet spot.
Regent Turner.
I hopefully have kind of a fun question. So you mentioned come April, May here, we got $500 million that is going to be due up with the CDs or whatever. So so what does that look like in your world? Are you guys putting in overtime, reinvesting that, or, I mean, it's kind of a elementary question, but do humor me.
Sure. Yeah, thank you, Regent Turner. Thank you, Chair Wheeler. So I would say that's just business as usual. I mean, there's, like I said, $50 to $100 million per day that we're reinvesting. So this is nothing anomalous, the $500 million that's maturing over the next month or two. The point is, there can be swings of upwards of $300 million in a given week of cash that comes in and then needs to go back out. And so this is very representative of kind of our typical base case in terms of just the sheer amount of cash flow. So as I think I mentioned in February, there's $15 billion of gross cash flow that our office manages every single year. And so they're big numbers, but when you look at it as percentages and you look at it relative to the operating budget, they're pretty, I think, intuitive. So no, for better or worse, the team is not having to work overtime just to manage that. We have, like I said, I think it would be representative of business as usual.
Give the last word to EVP Goldman. Do you have something else to say?
Well, just to follow up with your humorous comment about, the Treasury bonds are always, the gold standard, et cetera. Mm-hmm. We're concerned about that, right? Yeah.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Regent Turner and Regent Wheeler. I would say there's a lot of, I've said to EVP Goldman, I'm a short-term pessimist, but a long-term optimist, and there's a lot of things that worry us in the short term. I think over the longer term, we should be concerned about the sustainability of our federal deficits and what that can mean, obviously in this case, to the interest rate markets. I won't editorialize on some bigger picture issues with that. What I will say is, wearing my CIO hat, is that there's an interesting hedge to some degree that the university benefits from between the endowment, where I spend probably 70% of my time, which is, call it $2.5 billion, versus the operating pool, which is at, call it $1.8 billion on average. In that, in general, when interest rates are low, that benefits the endowment. When interest rates are high, that benefits the operating pool. And so we've seen that kind of natural level of diversification play out. So I just mentioned that to say, when we think about how we manage the risk profile of those two pools of capital, we don't necessarily view them in isolation. Now, they have different recipients and they benefit different parts of the institution. But I think there could be situations where higher interest rates could be problematic for the broader economy, could be problematic for the endowment, but it actually would allow us to probably generate some excess return in the operating pool.
Thank you. Regent Mohammed.
Thank you so much, Chair Wheeler. And thank you all for just the background. I think it was really robust and just providing us answers to the questions we had previously. One piece that I think was mentioned about, the fact that we maybe have one trader on hand right now. And so how are we accounting for, I think, continuity and just growth and just knowing that the marketplace is ever shifting? Is there further supports needed there, right? And a secondary question that I have is just around our investment portfolio and how are we thinking about diversification of that and also the ethics, right? And as things shift within the marketplace, how are we just keeping, a sense of just a temperature check there?
Sure. Thank you, Regent Mohammed and Chair Wheeler. So in terms of resource limitations, while we do have one individual, one full, I would say, FTE who's primarily dedicated to the operating pool, we do have an office of 11 in total, if I include myself, of 6 investment professionals, all of whom spend some time on aspects of the operating pool. And so there is some redundancy and some resource shifting that we can do if or when we either had turnover or something changed. So it's not an area that gives me a lot of pause. In terms of diversification in the portfolio, we spend a lot of time thinking about that, and I'll focus my comments on the operating pool. It's again, I spend most of my time on the endowment, and I know Regents Wheeler and Farnsworth hear me talk about this frequently in our quarterly investment committee meetings, but I would say the challenges for how we navigate this environment are much more difficult in the endowment than they are in the operating pool. I think the benefit of the operating pool is that in times of stress, people tend to there's referred to as a flight to quality or safety. So they tend to look at treasury bonds, but we've had the benefit in this environment of very high short-term interest rates. So very typically there's what's referred to as an upward sloping yield curve, meaning the longer it takes for your bond to mature, the higher the interest rate is. We've actually had an inverted yield curve for quite a while where you've gotten paid more to be in very short duration investments and less to hold on to it for a longer period of time. That tends to be a predictor of recessions, which is another issue. But the point is that's been a really nice opportunity for us because the shorter the duration of the investments, the more flexibility we have. So we can be reactive. The last thing I'll say is I'm a very strong proponent of everyone in our team understanding what our core competencies are and understanding where we can add value. And one thing that we are not trying to do is take big swings by trying to guess what the Fed's going to do next time around, trying to guess where the macroeconomic environment is going to go. It's not as grandiose of a vision, but really a lot of it is just picking up pennies over and over every single day, making marginal decisions that add up to generate excess returns. And I've shared with EVP Goldman, I think the front end of the curve is probably going to explain 75% of the return, and the other 25% is what we're trying to do to add value each and every day, which I think if we do well can add another 10 to 15 million a year of unencumbered cash that the university can benefit from. But I think in this environment, it's not an opportunity to try to be a hero and take a big swing at something, because I think it is very uncertain.
Right, Chair Wheeler. I just want to thank the committee for their patience in this presentation, but also for their understanding around it. And I also want to thank Mike and Andrew. Policies just guide what we do, but it's the people that do the work that actually generate the returns and the takeaways from this. And the work they're doing, as you'll see as we go through the budget process over the next months, have a dramatic impact into the overall financial health and the ability to move the university forward. So for that, I thank Mike and Andrew for the presentation and for the work around it.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
I would just add that I'll extend EVP Goldman's thanks to Julie as well, who pinged us beforehand and said she was going to be, even in retirement, she was going to be listening into the discussion. And she did a lot to chip in on this. So
yeah, thank you.
Appreciate her efforts.
And I can say for those of us who have sat or sit on the Investment Advisory Committee and or the debt management, along with the experts that are on those committees, your leadership is impressive, as is the commitment of those committee members. So thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Okay, we're moving to consent report. I'll turn it again to you.
Great. Chair Wheeler and members of the committee. The consent report today includes several items that require committee approval. The appointment of Dr. Joanne Billings, Interim Vice President for Research and Innovation, to the Hormel Institute Advisory Board to fill the seat reserved for her office by board policy. 2 agreements for the head coaches of our men's and women's hockey programs, a $38 million investment in Artisan network equipment and software through 2033. This is a critical end-of-life replacement of the university's core network infrastructure. Additionally, this infrastructure provides the high-speed connections that Mayo Clinic and other state colleges rely on us to provide for the entire region, which we should note we are reimbursed for. And the purchase of 620 and 626 First Avenue Southwest in Rochester. These acquisitions are critical to continue the growth and integration of our Rochester campus within the city's vibrant medical center and technology ecosystem. President Cunningham recommends approval of the consent report.
Great, thank you very much. And before I ask for a motion to approve, I'll see if there's any questions or comments, or if anybody wants us to pull anything off the consent agenda. Seeing none, is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second? Second. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Great, thank you very much. Motion is approved. And now, I'm going to turn to it. I always forget this last page. Information items. I'll turn again to you.
Chair Wheeler and members of the committee, for our 3 information items today, I will highlight just one, the successful refinancing of our general obligation bonds and Build America bonds. The refinancing occurred during a period of market volatility resulting from the national and international factors. Nevertheless, we were able to secure over $15 million of debt savings over the next 15 years. The refinancing of the Build America bonds also effectively eliminate the risk associated with federal subsidy reductions and demonstrates our commitment to smart, proactive debt management. Chair Wheeler, that is my report.
That's an incredible outcome at a very volatile time, so I think we can all recognize that. Any other comments or discussion? All right, there being no new business before the committee, we stand adjourned. Thank you very much.